Okay, today I'm going to be talking about pet food labels and recalls. I have a couple pictures of my dog spread out through this presentation, so if you see a black contaminant picture, that's my dog. I included him because he eats very high quality dog food because he's so small he doesn't eat a lot, so me and my family decided it's a good idea to splurge on his dog food. And he's 7 years old and we've had no problems with him. He's never had to go to the vet for anything other than stuff he's done, such as swallow foreign objects. So no health problems, and he only eats a half a cup of food a day. So
Wow.
a small bag lasts him about a month. And so, but disclaimer, the food that we feed him is really nice and we've never had problems with it. So. A brief history of pet food recalls. There was a massive pet food recall in 2007, and it was the biggest in North American history. Over 60 million cans and bags of pet food were recalled. Thousands of cats and dogs became ill, and many died of kidney failure. And the culprit turned out to be melamine, which was found in wheat gluten that had been imported from China. Melamine is used as a fertilizer and is used in the production of plastic. It's relatively non-toxic in small amounts, but it was reacted with cyanuric acid in pet food and created a harmful compound that built up in the kidneys and caused kidney failure. And a lot of dogs and cats, and about, I think, 3,600 died. So it was the biggest one in history. And shortly after this happened, 2 Chinese companies and 1 American company known as ChemNutra pleaded guilty to knowing that the wheat gluten that they put in their product contained melamine. And because similar to how sometimes in the drug industry, like illegal drug industry, people put different compounds in their drugs in order to make it seem like they have more than they actually do, the Chinese companies were doing this with some of their fillers, such as corn, wheat gluten, and rice. They were putting different chemicals in it, so it looked like they had more than they actually did. And melamine was one of these ingredients that they had been putting in their wheat gluten. And the American company did know this, and they still put it in their dog food, and that's why there was so many recalls. And then because of this, Congress realized that there wasn't any quality standards for the ingredients going into pet food, and there wasn't a process in place to ensure that ingredients from foreign distributors like China didn't contain unsafe substances. And so then the Human, Pet, and Food Safety Act went into effect, and this required the FDA to write quality standards for all pet food ingredients, strengthen labeling rules, and establish an early warning system to post searchable online recall lists. And all these things were supposed to be done by September of 2009, and only the last 2 have really been done. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the labeling rules a little bit later, but there is a online recall list, and it's by the FDA, and it's called the Safety Reporting Portal, and you can submit and view recall lists for both human and animal foods.
I want to make a comment here. Yeah, I remember this very well, and here's what happens with melamine. Actually, if you look in some of your kitchen cabinets, there might be some plates made of melamine, sorry. You know, when it's inert like that, that's not going to hurt you. But here's what happened, and here's why they used it. Does anybody know what % nitrogen is in melamine?
67.
67% nitrogen. So this compound, melamine, which is from a petroleum product, if you analyze it, it's 67% nitrogen. That's highly unusual. And so the companies were putting it into this gluten because then when somebody whenever you're a company buying things, you analyze things for, like, protein is the most expensive. And how do you analyze for protein in a feed stuff? The nitrogen content. You multiply it by what? The nitrogen? 6.25?
Yeah.
So whatever % nitrogen it is, then you multiply it by 6.25, you get % protein. Well, the companies are going, wow, this is great wheat gluten meal because now I don't have to use as much to get my protein content up in the dog food. So they were going, gaga over this high protein. Little did they know it was melamine that was falsely it was really giving you true nitrogen, but it wasn't from protein. So it was very incredibly big scandal. The sad part is, I think in China, the companies, and probably without history, they didn't know how bad it was, but they were putting it into infant formula. And there were some infants that were also killed, I think mostly in China. Yeah, because they were selling it all over. They were, having a bonanza. It was terrible, and it does it's really basically a nephrotoxin, right? The kidney, because it makes these little crystals and actually cuts up the nephron. So, you know, this is very interesting to do this, and yeah, the standards are crazy, so go ahead.
And so even months after the 2007 recall, different commercial pet food companies were again using grain additives and other ingredients from China. And this is because poor quality pet foods lose their nutritional value when they are processed. They're processed in a process called extrusion, and this is how human cereals are kind of made. And so they take wet and dry ingredients and combine them together to make a dough consistency, then put the dough through a tube that has either hot steam or water on the other side to cook the dough. And then it's forced through little holes. So these are like the little, sometimes your dog food shaped like little fish or stars or circles. Yeah, so it goes, squeezes through that, and a knife cuts
and
off.
that thing that it's squeezed through is called a die. I think
A
it's
die.
Probably DIE is probably,
Yeah.
you know, but it's a die, and you can put any kind of shape you want, and you got this high pressure and temperature, and it cooks, like you say, that paste or whatever, and it comes out, there's a knife cutting it, and you got these
And
shapes.
then when they dry, they puff up, and that's what the kibble is. But a lot of the nutrients are lost in that process, and so you need to spray synthetic vitamins, minerals, and protein fillers on top of the kibble in order to get that nutrition back. And they found out that this was happening because back in the 1980s, taurine is a nutrient that's in meat, but it's not, it gets lost in this extrusion process. And dogs in the 1980s and cats, indoor cats, were going blind and getting heart disease because of the taurine deficiency. And they traced it back to that and realized that it was getting burnt off in the extrusion process. And so then now they spray a synthetic taurine on top of the kibble. But China is the cheapest place to get all these different ingredients, and so that's why companies still import their ingredients from China. And this is bad because Chinese producers don't follow the same farming and manufacturing guidelines that the FDA requires the United States to do. So there's a lot of improper handling of pesticides and bad environmental regulations. This creates bad ingredients that don't have sufficient testing. And then they come to the United States because right now there still isn't labeling laws in the United States, and it doesn't require companies to list where their ingredients come from. And so a food can be labeled made in the U.S. if it's put together and processed in the U.S., but the ingredients can come from China. And so that's not good. And so another problem is 4D meats. And so according to the FDA website, pet food consisting of material from diseased animals or animals which have died otherwise than by slaughter will be considered fit for animal consumption, and that's right off the current FDA website, even though this meat is not fit for human consumption. And so 4D stands for dead, dying, diseased, and disabled. And otherwise than by slaughter includes stuff like roadkill and animals that are on feedlots that die in transport or die in the yard. That includes those. And so a lot of these raw meat ingredients are often left outside in the sun of the heat, and then rodents and bugs can get into the meat, but they're still used in pet food. The process of combining all this meat is called rendering. So the carcasses are placed in huge vats. They're ground up and cooked for several hours. This removes water, separates fat, and kills pathogens. And the separated fat is known as animal fat. So if your pet food contains chicken fat, beef fat, that's the fat we're talking about. And remaining dried solids is what the other half of the rendering process yields, and that's known as animal byproduct meal, or animal meal. So chicken meal would be the dry solids. Oh, I pressed the wrong button. And so this is an example, sorry, graphic disclaimer, of a rendering
Put
plant.
your cookies down.
Yeah, a rendering plant in Sacramento, California. And so as you can see, the outside meat just in the sun, and also some carcasses that have been dropped off before the rendering.
I love the sign. Will not accept dead animals on
I know, it's like a time.
But they will other times. And then
Yeah.
how long has that animal been dead?
Who knows?
Could be 2 days it was there until you got around to bringing it
Yeah,
over there.
and this specific plant was making the news a lot, not because of the rendering process, but that the residents were complaining because the city spends a lot of money on air odor eliminators, but a lot of the residents refuse to leave their homes because the smell is so bad in the city near the plant, and they've had to cancel a lot of outdoor activities in their neighborhoods because of how bad the smell is. So that's why this company has been, city's been making the news, because the citizens are not very happy. And some food labeling rules, I found this stuff really interesting. And so there's a 95% rule, which states that 5% of the food that's named must be in the, basically if it says chicken for dogs or beef food for dogs, the chicken, if the name of the food comes before the animal name, it needs to contain 95%. But then there's also different rules. So if it's a dinner food, so chicken dinner dog food, or beef entree cat food, it only needs to contain 25% if it's a dinner, and that also includes those other words down there. There's a 3% with rule, so if it's dog food with chicken, it only needs to contain 3% chicken.
And it could be any part of the chicken, probably.
Yeah, any part too. And then the flavor rule, if it's a chicken flavored dog food, it only needs to contain enough chicken fat to flavor the food, so it doesn't need to include any actual meat. And so I found this on the Target website, and so this canned dog food is $1.24. And so it's chunky ground dinner. So by the rules, it needs to contain 25% chunky ground, whatever that is, and that it's with beef, with beef, bacon, and cheese flavor.
And I love that, the 3%.
So it needs 3% beef, bacon, and cheese
flavor.
So fat.
Beef. Okay, beef and bacon, then cheese flavor.
But it only needs 3% of all of those fats,
Right.
and that's it.
Okay, now the other thing is on that can of food, what percent of the can is water? 80.
Yeah, and the wet foods is about 70 to 80.
Yeah.
The drier foods are
Right, the dry, like kibble is about 10%.
10%.
But yeah, I mean, 80% of that can is water, first of all. And
Less than 3 has to be any type of meat, so by law.
Yeah.
And so how to protect your pet is to try and stay away from cheap commercial pet foods. But in some cases it's not avoidable, but giving your pet the highest quality diet that you personally can afford is the best thing you could do for them. Look for diets that were sourced in the United States, so the ingredients are from the United States, not places like China. Manufactured with natural whole foods, free of byproducts of meat meals because those are from the rendering plants. Organic foods are like without antibiotics. The animals are raised on better diets and that kind of stuff. And so if a diet lists itself as 25% organic, that means that 25% of the ingredients have to be organic. So that's also good. You can also make your own dog food or feed raw. I know there's like salmonella issues with feeding raw, but I don't know very much about dog food or feeding raw, but that's something you can also do. And there's an FDA food recall website, and I looked up my dog's food on this and it's not on there. But you can also look up anything that the company, like my dog eats from, and so the latest thing from it was they had a recall on 3 canned foods in 2016, and that was the only thing I could find on that specific company. And so all the information's out there. This was the Blue Buffalo issue that you saw in March of 2017, and that was because it had extra beef thyroid hormone in this specific food, so that was causing like diabetes-like symptoms, so a lot of increased thirst and urination. And yeah, but they recalled that.
Okay, before you go, yeah, there's actually, go back to one slide. There's actually 3 ways to feed your dog, really, in my mind. You can buy the kibble, right?
Yeah.
And you're kind of saying get the best quality you can. Then you can do what I do. I cook human ingredients and feed my dogs. Beef, I always get stuff on sale. Thanksgiving time, I can get turkeys for 67 cents a pound. I've got some from I think one time I had 12 turkeys in the freezer. So I cook, and my wife likes it too, because, oh yeah, turkey, we have turkey besides Thanksgiving. Or you can do raw. So I do cooked ingredients, all, human. And then a student in one of my other classes is feeding raw, and she gave a presentation, and she had like a mackerel head of a fish there, and there's that salmonella argument, but you could talk yourself, what's it, rendering versus salmonella, and dogs are pretty resistant to it anyway. Somebody had a comment.
I have like a friend who started feeding their dog raw, like raw, because they were having like a skin reaction to every kind of food that they tried to make for them otherwise.
Well, when you look at the bag of kibble, where's all that stuff? They have to add so much because some of it's getting destroyed in the extrusion, and that's a good name for it, extrusion. But You know, I feed a little vitamin supplement. I give them some table salt sometimes. Potassium chloride is salt substitute. There's all kinds of these recipes, but it's time consuming. Kibble is easy. The other stuff, the other two ways is hard. Yes.
So do you think that like the food that most veterinarians sell, so like Science Diet and stuff like that, is that better or?
I would say definitely look at the ingredients on the back. So the first listed ingredient item is what is the most in it. And also look at those labeling rules. So if you're getting food that is with something, it contains less than if it's...
Well, I would just say, just because a dog food is sold in a veterinarian office doesn't mean crap to me.
It
right?
could be bribed to sell it too.
Well, I mean, no, it's another income stream. But there are those diets like for animals with kidney disorders and stuff, and I think they probably have some value. But, you know, just because it's there, you know, doesn't mean it's good. Let's just put it that way, right? Here we go.
I was just gonna say, as far as like with the protein requirements, at least for dogs, it's around like, you know, 16, 18, 20, something like that. But
Very high.
yeah, my mom told me that at one point my dog had a food that had like 26% protein, but that was just because he had had a recent bacterial infection throughout his intestines, so it kind of like helped with the recovery process.
And they gave, yeah, and there's some of that's a whole another big area. How about, you know, if you have an injured animal or sick animal, what to feed them? You know, because the more protein, the more available amino acids, and that helps build up somebody that's been sick. So it's a big thing that we know too little of.
Yeah, I just made my mom send me the back of my dog's dog food, and it's called salmon dog food, and the first ingredient is salmon meat, so
Yeah.
95% salmon. So
Yeah,
pretty good.
so that's neat. Okay.